This technological progression or inventing of certain devices does not increase your access to the different dimensions. Rather, in the same dimension, it gives you a little bit more area into the gross elements, namely space, water, etc. But what we are talking about as far as the UFO machines are concerned, they are not made of the gross matter that we are using. This is why there is all possibility to conclude from the symptoms how people have noticed your UFO machines. It's very easy to deduct that they are not made of the gross matter like our machines are made of. They are made of subtle matter. So, because they are made of subtle matter, the principles governing the movement or the force of such subtle matter is also the subtle rules of matter. So that is what I mean, that when they move, that is how their speed is incalculable. Sometimes they are very slow, sometimes they are very fast. Sometimes suddenly they can go 300 meters in half a second because they are not moving in this space. That's very clear. So from the symptoms that people describe these UFO machines, to me it's very clear that they are using another space. Same way with the ETs, the way they move. I have experienced candidates, other higher human beings from both lower and higher levels of this creation, with whom I have had contacts. The way they move is very clear. They look like they are floating, etc. But it is not floating. It is just that they are using a different space within the same space.
So within the different dimensions, you will find different elements operating, or different qualities of the same elements operating.
Yeah, different rules are there.
Different rules.
Like the ETs can walk through the wall.
For them, it's not a wall.
For them, it's not wall. It is just another space. They are just, but they may find it more easier to walk through where you have doors, even though the doors are closed.
Interesting.
Because our space has some effect in that space, but it doesn't limit it as much as it limits us. So when a candidate is abducted into their area, what happens is that by mind control, by controlling the mind of the person who is abducted, they bring that person's form or physical form also into their dimension. They have capacity for that. That is how the abductee happens to go through a window and then come back, etc.
So they have the power to empower others to operate within their dimension.
They just bring you under control. It's just like a person who has got an entry provision into the, say, United Nations building, and if it is under the rules, then he can bring somebody else with him.
I see.
But if you go by yourself, you can't.
You can't. You can't. So what are these? You mentioned the subtle and gross elements. What are these elements, and how are they divided into subtle and gross? What are these elements?
Well, everything which is gross has got within it many subtle levels of it. Just like right on the gross earth, you find various levels, various kinds of earth right on this planet. Some more solid, some more soft, some has more moisture, some has fiery elements in it. So this is gross matter. In this way there is also subtle matter. And beings, living beings, are given different areas which come under different dimensional rules. And as the higher beings can always use the area of the lower beings, but it is not vice versa. These are all higher physics, or deeper physics, I would say. Physics as it is, is quite advanced in our area, but it's advancing on one particular direction. There are deeper physics and chemistry of matter.
Yeah, we're getting into the realm of quantum physics and even beyond that.
Yeah, science may, in another 1,000 years, reach this level. But still, it doesn't mean that the human is going to increase his access in the dimension. But by process of yoga and meditation, and this is how you find that the yogis perform things which don't conform so much to the rules of physics. Because the consciousness that a human being possesses and the set of senses which are in a perfect human body, they have the capacity to be tuned in because after all it is the consciousness that moves everything. So by developing higher consciousness or deeper consciousness, even within the human form of body, one may get into the area of different subtle matter level, but even that is limited.
Now, Atmananda Swami, you were saying that within every element there are gross and subtle features. Mind is a subtle element, and I guess we can say that earth is a gross element. What are the elements in between that and beyond that we can say to set in our minds which are gross, which are subtle, and how they interact and how they come to be and how they're influencing the situation that we're talking about in terms of the manipulation of the energies by so-called extraterrestrials?
Categorically, there are 8 elements according to Vedic scriptures. 5 are gross and 3 are subtle. The gross elements are earth, water, fire, ether and air. The subtle elements are mind, intelligence and identity, or it is known as false ego. These 3 are subtle. They are not visible to the eye. They cannot be touched or smelled or heard. This is the definition of what is subtle. So now, within these 5 gross elements, by combination of one with the other, for example, earth has all the other 4 elements. Now, if the proportion of water is increased on earth, then it becomes less gross. In this way, if the fire element is increased, then it becomes more subtle. If you include the ether element in it, it becomes more subtle. So this is the science of changing the proportions of material elements. One can do it in the laboratory externally, and one can also do it by utilizing sense control of senses, and by concentrating the mind in a particular way. Inwardly also one can act, one can have control over the outside elements. This is the process of yoga.
So we're getting into a different realm here. You mentioned yoga on several occasions as the means for obtaining control over these subtle elements. Are we to understand that yakshas are engaged in some kind of a yogic principle? Or the celestials that you mentioned, the demigods, they're also engaged in yoga, and human beings, how can they be engaged in yoga, and to what extent?
Just like in Olympics, if you want to go for swimming, then you make some 3 months very hard practice, but the fishers don't have to. Fishes, they come out, they immediately swim. They don't need any practice. So for the human to have control over these elements or understand them or to deal with them, he needs yoga. But a fish is born with the power of swimming, and the crow is born with the power of flying. So yakshas are born with the intellectual capacity of doing mechanistic science.
So they're not doing any yoga?
They don't need it. That is not yoga for them. For us it is yoga.
Yoga is the process.
Yeah, by which we attain that level of consciousness. In fact, if you understand transmigration, that is when you leave that human body, then you take that type of a human body, and then you are called by a particular name as Gandharva, Yaksha in the Vedic language, and Iti in your language.
Mm-hmm. So, could you tell us then about this hierarchy of ETs as we see them or perceive or hear about them? According to the Vedic scenario, there are living beings like us who have specific forms and specific activities that they do, scattered throughout the universe or universes. Who are these beings?
As far as the UFO interference within human realm for the past half century, my conclusion through my research and my reference to different informants or contacts that I have, they are just from the area of yakshas, bhutas, kinnaras and kimpurushas. I give you a little explanation about these. Bhutas are what you may call in English as goblins. They have a gross body which is subtler than ours. These are the small beings who have been noticed by different candidates in your UFO phenomenon. They are very small, they are short, their head is big, and they have short legs, and sometimes they use machines, sometimes they don't. They can appear and disappear at will. Then there are Kimpurusha who are Kim Purusha in the Sanskrit language means what kind of human. They human, but they don't look human to us. They are much bigger than us. They are like 3-4 times of our size. They have cube-like, cone-like ears. They also have a little bigger size head, but certainly they don't look like some of these drawings you find in the UFO literature. They got broad chest, thin waist, very strong thighs. The descriptions are given in the Vedic literature. And interestingly enough, Bhavishya Purana, one of the 18 Puranas of the Vedic literature, predicts that in the 5,000 years after the beginning of this particular Yuga cycle called Kali, Kinnaras and Kimpurushas would interfere in the human area using their space machines, and they will bewilder the human beings. This has been predicted. Because of the universal law that the human is supposed to follow is broken too much in the present times. So they try to interfere, and then they try to set us on our path.
So give us some idea then of what that universal principle is.
The principle is that everything in the material nature is not meant for self-centered exploitation. Plants, animals, reptiles, human beings, higher human beings, all have to live within this material nature in a very cooperative way. Exploitation for sense gratification of one kingdom over the other kingdom is not allowed. It's not the law. You cannot just go on shave the mountains of all the trees and just to produce useless newspapers or magazines. I'm just coming down to practical discussion of what is wrong with us. Or you cannot just go on producing chemicals, breaking chemicals and making more chemicals for unnecessary usage, which once was luxury, now is need. So these type of things, the human are going too far. So there is enough space, there is enough food, there is enough water for the whole creation, within the creation, and more is kept in case there is famine. So the material nature supplies more. But unfortunately, man has become too self-centered, and he is acting too whimsically. He thinks that except him there is nobody else in this creation. He is the Lord of everything. So this is the problem. And if the human doesn't wake up to this situation and understand and withdraw his exploiting activities, then both material nature and those who are little more power than us will certainly interfere.
And this is what we see is going on right now. They're interfering.
Yes, they are here. They are here offering us some help.
Yeah.
And also because the way the human acts on this planet affects everybody else.
Mm-hmm. In terms of the entire cosmos.
Just imagine if 5 million mosquitoes suddenly invade Mission Viejo.
Mm-hmm. That would create quite a stir.
Yeah, so exactly like that. So, but they don't do it. But the human is encroaching everywhere.
Mm-hmm. Why is the human species so important? Give us some idea to understand this.
Well,
why don't they go somewhere else?
Well, there is two things: consciousness and matter. Matter evolves from element to element, form to form, shape to shape, sensory perception to sensory perception, and that is due to the presence of consciousness. In this way, the individual consciousness goes through different designs of matter, and one of such designs with a very perfect set of senses to deal with matter, if guided properly, that is human form. And there are 4,400,000 species of human form.
This is the number given in the Vedas.
This is according to the Vedas. There are 8,400,000 species of life within the universe.
Not all of them here on this planet, or do they all?
Not all of them necessarily are in this planet. Some are. They are distributed all over the creation.
I see.
And according to time scale, sometime some species which may be present on this planet may become extinct later.
Mm-hmm. The form is extinct, but doesn't mean that they don't exist.
That particular category of species may not be present on the earth for a particular period of time, but it may be present elsewhere. At any case, at any particular time, if you take the whole universe, 8,400,000 species of life are there. So 400,000 species are human. Among them, some are civilized, some are semi-civilized, some are more civilized. So we find right on this planet different levels of human beings. So the human being is like the biomedia between lower beings, lower human beings, and higher human beings, and highest human beings. So human being on earth is very, very important that way.
Mm-hmm. He's a link between all of these different...
He is practically the stage where the pull of both polar opposites, they stage their activities and functions.
All right, explain what that means, the polar opposites.
The polar opposites are, if you want to put it in simple terms, the good and evil, which in the Vedic language we call as devas and asuras.
Okay.
These are beings of evil nature or good nature. So human is kind of mirroring or reflecting these qualities. So if a human follows his law of functioning and duty, then he will reflect the higher beings. He will reflect the good quality beings. If he doesn't, then he will be reflecting the bad quality beings.
Let's back up a second, because there are some groups of thinkers on this planet who don't recognize necessarily those two words, good, evil. In other words, nothing is good, nothing is evil. Whatever you do is what you do, and whatever the result is, well, it's the result. But they don't recognize anything as being necessarily evil. So how do we understand that they're opposite? There are two polarities within this universe. One you describe as good, or being, as you say, deva, and the one being evil, being the asura. How do we deal with that? Is it good?
The demarcation is anybody who is following the law of the world. There is a law of the world where by abiding by which everybody can live, coexist very nicely.
That's good.
That's called law. And anybody when a person who doesn't follow it is known as demon. A person who cares for following it is known as God or demigod. This is a demarcation in the Vedic literature.
But this is not something religious or something that we're talking about.
For religious people it is religious. For philosophical people it is philosophical. For people of physics it is physics. It's just like if you all have a sane traffic law, and those who don't care for following that law is a demon. And if one cares for following that law, it's a demigod, it's a good citizen.
Yeah, I see. So in that sense we...
Yeah, so the thing is that the modern knowledge or education thinks that there is what we see only is true, there is nothing more to that. That means whatever we are seeing in this planet, they are all the beings, that's it, there's nothing more. But it is a fact, right from the UFO phenomena, that there are other beings. Otherwise, what is all these machines coming? Where did all these abductees go? So, what is all these phenomena which is happening right in front of us? So, there are other beings, there are other planes, and it is high time that we accept this as a scientific information. And if for a religious person, he may take it from a religious point of view, but still, an object is an object. Suppose you have a wooden cross. For a carpenter, it is just two pieces of wood joined together.
Right.
For a Christian, it's a holy cross.
Right.
But still, the object is there.
It's the same.
You can't dismiss the object just because somebody has a religious sentiment towards it.
Right.
So truth is truth. So according to Vedanta, the world is real. Vishwam Satyam means the world is real.
Vedanta meaning?
Vedanta means end of knowledge. The Upanishads portion of the Vedic literature is known as Vedanta. So according to Vedic literature, the world is real. The differences are real. So there is nothing false. So the reality is there, and within reality there are different levels of consciousness bearing different forms of physics. They are existing, and there is a law by which everyone can coexist. Just like in a little water tank, a small fish is the food of the bigger fish, and the bigger fish is the food of a frog, and the frog is the food of a snake. But you never hear that inside a water tank there is a world war. But you do hear that there is a world war between human beings.
Right.
So you can see this greed and enviousness and self-centeredness means people do not want to follow the law of material nature. They don't want to coexist. They want to exploit the other person. They want to be the lord of everything that they see. You never see in the animal kingdom or in the bird's kingdom, if you throw a few grains, a bird will come and take what maybe for the bird's stomach, maybe one or two for the small ones. But is that the case if you leave a few bags of grains outside? Will the human do the same?
No, it'll take it himself.
So this is a point. But human is given discrimination so that he can act better than animals and birds and insects and reptiles. But unfortunately, he acts worse than them. So this is what we mean by human is not following the law of existence. He doesn't want to coexist. He is usurping everybody else's freedom. So he has to be put in position.
He has to be put in his place.
Yes, so that is why UFOs are here.
It is to, in some cases, very gently, because we have stories of beings appearing and giving a gentle message. You should pray more, you should fast, you should be
yes,
live a good life.
There are 4 methods of getting a person to follow the law. The first method is to preach to him.
And we see that
and the second method is to create some dissension, to create some the divide and rule policy. The third method is to offer him something so that he will be bribed. And the fourth method is hit on his head. So these methods are followed by all civilized people.
And different beings choose different ones to
Of course, according to how you react to them.
Well,
so if you do not listen to these messages of the UFO and you simply write it off as phantasmagoria, then they will strike.
They will strike. Well, obviously, mankind has a purpose, but it seems that he has strayed from that purpose. Can we define what that purpose is outside of, say, the Western religious experience of the Bible, for example? You know, because a lot of people have a reaction against anything they hear that's biblical, Old Testament. Anything dealing with religion, anything like that, it seems to bring up negativity in a lot of people's minds. How can we understand what that purpose is then, based on a scientific principle? Why are we here? What is this? What is the purpose of this? Having this form that even we see being from other dimensions and other areas are coming to tell us, do like this, act like this, giving us messages, doing things for us that we can't do for ourselves to help us along. What is this leading us to?
Well, the purpose of human life, according to Vedanta, the Vedic literature, is to come to his constitutional position. The living being is not material. The matter is an external covering for the living being. And due to the idea of lauding tendency, various designs of matter is provided for the spirit. And we are all individual souls. So to come to that perfection of understanding that we are individual souls and we have a duty to perform. Of course, in a subject matter like UFO, this type of discussion will may sound like too far religious or too far esoteric. But at least from the point of view of how to coexist with everybody else, the purpose is there for the human being, that he has got discrimination, he has got intelligence more than the other kingdoms, namely plants and animals, and birds, etc. So he has dominion over these kingdoms. This doesn't mean he exploits them. You have dominion over your children. You have dominion over your younger ones. This doesn't mean that you exploit them, you abuse them. So, non-envious, non-self-centered, peaceful coexistence is the first aim of existence here. And of course, from there we can go further to God consciousness, etc.